And get started. Hopefully everyone's bellies are full. Thank you for a very delicious and healthy lunch. It's that time of day. Grab a coffee and buckle up because we've got a great lineup for the next two panels. The next panel we titled Ethical Considerations, which again is a very broad topic, but we have three very talented and qualified speakers up next who will be speaking on a more specific level within their expertise. The first up is Dr. Richard Fleming, and we've had the opportunity to hear from him a couple times today. And he holds many titles with lots of letters behind his name. His bio was long enough that we've decided to let his presentation speak for itself in terms of his expertise. And with that, I will hand over the microphone to you, Dr. Fleming.
Thank you very much. Let me see if I can do screen share. I enjoyed the comment that was made earlier about millennials. So I think hopefully you can see that. I think over the last 22 months, it's become very clear to everybody on planet Earth, unless they've been living under a rock, that we've been dealing with a new type of virus that has been put together with gain-of-function research that's been paid for quite extensively from the United States, but other countries, to put a genetic coded sequence together for a virus, the same code of which is contained within the vaccine, so that when we're looking at SARS-CoV-2, the virus, or COVID-19, the disease that emanates from that, or the drug vaccine biologics that are being used, we're really talking about an overextension of use of technology and science by individuals who do not appear to have had the best of intent for humanity and were much more focused on what they were doing. Subsequently, they have violated a number of treaties and ethical responsibilities of humans. And as you can see in the first slide here, this requires that we address this on an individual and a nation state level to bring these people responsible for this to International Criminal Court, as well as courts within the countries, including the United States, for crimes against humanity. SARS-CoV-2 is very clearly a bioweapon. It's a human-engineered virus with gain of function. It's been very obviously tracked over the last 2 decades. And a bioweapon is simply a modified biological agent, in this case, a virus that has no benefit to humanity and can produce extensive systemic suffering across the planet. It's a violation of the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty, as you can see here, by anyone or any nation. The United States has not only signed but ratified the Biological Weapons Convention Treaty. The data very clearly shows that the U.S. government was involved with it, the Department of Defense, National Institutes of Health, the National Institutes of Allergies and Infectious Diseases. This is the 1975 Biological Weapons Convention Treaty, so I'll make it available in slides for people to read at their leisure. There's multiple articles, all of which relate to all these nations, with a few exceptions in Africa, recognizing that we don't make biological weapons. And the reason for that is that history has taught us that when human beings start experimenting on other human beings, very bad outcomes occur. This is back from 1947, when the last time a nation actually did experimentation on people without informed consent, for the benefit of what they considered their people, that the 1947 Nuremberg charges were brought upon 24 defendants for crimes of conspiracy, crimes against the peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity. Things have not changed. This is Gehring's statement during the 1947 trial, where he basically laid out in very simple terms that any nation can cause its people to do whatever it wants if you tell them that there's a problem, that there's an answer, and that anybody who poses that lack patriotism. And I think that, the American jurist opposed that and said, no, not the United States. And Gehring very clearly pointed out that didn't matter if you had a republic, a parliament, fascist, socialistic, or communist society, if a government told you there was a problem, told you there was an answer, and that you must follow that answer, and anybody who did not was anti-patriotic, that you could manipulate the society, and that's what we've seen today. These are the names of the 24 defendants that were held accountable in Nuremberg 2. But I want you to understand that these were not the only trials that occurred in Nuremberg. In fact, after these individuals, of which 12 of them received death sentences, there were 11 more trials that were added, including the doctors' trials and the judges' trials. And it's critical that people understand that we're not going to get by and just blame a government or blame somebody doing research, and they will be held accountable. They're going to be in the first go round. But doctors and individuals who provide for these vaccines without informed consent, and judges who allow them to legally do that, will be held accountable. Remember, the Nazis didn't think that anybody was going to hold them legally accountable, and they learned in 1947 that that was not the case. This is Dr. Joseph Mengele. He was a typical physician. He thought he was doing everything for the German people and for the betterment of the German government. Kind of a reverberating pattern that we're hearing from people in every country, including the United States. It's for the good of the people. Just do what we tell you to do. The Nuremberg Code is a very well-known established set of 10 principles put together by physicians during the Nuremberg trial to address what was considered atrocities against humanity that could not be done anymore. And these were put together because at the time of the trial, it was discovered there weren't any rules that anybody was following in Germany or the United States or the UK or Japan. Manipulations, and we know it continues in this country with the Tuskegee Airmen and the radiation trials, and the list is endless of atrocities committed against people despite these codes and treaties and laws. And this is an image of the actual Nuremberg Code from 1947. Here's the permissible experiments, and you will see voluntary consent is a requirement. It can't be mandated away. It can't be mandated away by an executive order. It can't be mandated away by a legislative action. It is simply a violation of codes and treaties, as you'll see here in a moment, of what's required for informed consent. Nuremberg 2 laid down these 10 standards, of which voluntary informed consent of human subjects was a requirement and still is. If you look at the first code that was put, the voluntary consent of the human subject is absolutely essential. It doesn't get any plainer than that. You can finish the rest of that one, and there's 9 others that follow, but I want you to be able to see that. I do want to play, if this, I don't know if this little clip will play. You'll be able to tell me in a moment if this little clip plays, but this is from a brief time segment of 1947. Are you able to hear that?
Just video, no audio. Can you, We're getting the video, but not the audio, Dr. Fleming.
Okay. Okay, so we'll stop that. But the point that they were making was that these physicians always thought they were well-intended. They were doing what they thought was right for Nazi Germany. And this is exactly what we're hearing today. Of those 23, 16 were found guilty and 7 were executed. The American Medical Association has a code of ethics that requires that physicians must provide informed consent. I would say that people are not being provided informed consent. I've seen nobody being told the benefits and the risk of these drug vaccine biologics. I've seen, in fact, no evidence that physicians actually know what the informed consent is, because these 3 papers here are the package inserts for Pfizer, Moderna, and Janssen, and they are intentionally left blank. There is no informed consent, no risks, no benefits. So physicians providing these vaccines are violating the American Medical Association Code of Ethics for the provision of informed consent. And if they actually read through the emergency use documents, they would see that there is no statistical reduction in COVID or death cases, although there are significant adverse events. This is from the Declaration of Helsinki, another set of principles that physicians are required and countries are required to follow. That it is the duty of physicians to provide for the protection of the research subjects. That is the primary concern, though they've given consent. So a requirement, again, for informed consent. This continues through the rest of the Declaration of Helsinki. These are the research requirements, and number 25 specifically addresses informed consent, something that is being violated, and you cannot have the President of the United States provide an executive order that says that federal employees must receive the vaccine when that violates informed consent. A mandate says you don't have a choice. This is for people to read through at their own leisure. More on the Declaration of Helsinki. Again, even at the very end, informed consent from the patient or legally authorized representative is critical for unproven interventions in clinical practice. These are the Hippocratic Oaths that physicians like myself and the other speakers take, where we maintain the utmost respect for human life, and we will not, even under threat, I guess that could be the President of the United States or medical boards or anybody else, we will not use our medical knowledge contrary to the laws of humanity, the Nuremberg Code, or the laws of humanity, as are the following treatments or the following treaties. Back in 1967, the International Covenant on Civil and Political Rights was established following Eleanor Roosevelt's efforts to make certain that experimentation on humans would never occur again as it was in Nazi Germany. And when you go to Article 7, it says very specifically, no one shall be subjected to torture or cruel, inhumane, or degrading treatment or punishment. In particular, no one shall be subjected without his free consent to medical or scientific experimentation. Following the original leaders of Nazi Germany, following the doctors' trials, they held the judges and the attorneys responsible for changing the laws and making it possible for these atrocities to occur. And you'll see here, these are the judges that went to trial in the judges or judicial trial component of Nuremberg. Everything that's happened since the forced vaccination of individuals and the gain-of-function virus fits in line with the definitions already established for crimes of conspiracy, crimes against peace, war crimes, and crimes against humanity, both the development, the testing of this biological weapon, the release of this biological weapon, the interference with physicians providing medical treatment to patients, and the interference with doctors recognizing the treatments that are necessary so that further harm would not be caused. And this is the reason why people die from their inflammatory thrombotic response to the virus, because no treatments were provided in hospitals. And so at the end of 2019, if you came to a hospital and you sought medical attention, we treated you for whatever the problem was. In 2019 and early 2020, the practice in the United States and around the world became, we have no treatment for you. It doesn't matter if we would normally have treated your breathing problems or clotting problems. We can't treat you if it's this virus. Go home, come back, hopefully before you die, so that you will come in here and die. These people should be held accountable again for failure to follow the testing requirements of drugs, the tissue and animal models. The animal models that have been done show prion diseases and inflammatory thrombotic responses without any benefit to the animals. It shows suppression of the immune system. The human models show suppression of T helper 2 cells and interferon, the very thing necessary to provide immunity. Again, these for the same charges for failure to find informed consent, because it's a violation of the Nuremberg Code, Declaration of Helsinki, ICCPR, and the AMA medical ethics component. This experimentation upon citizens, particularly the frail and the elderly with physical and mental diseases, and the experimentation upon children with these same experimental drug vaccines are crimes against humanity, crimes against peace, war crimes, and conspiracy. Here's an example of a judge who recently forced individuals who had not committed crimes necessarily, but were in jails, that they must become vaccinated. This judge is going to be one of the people that will be held accountable, as will everybody who's involved in the forced vaccination of individuals. I'm not saying people can't be vaccinated if they choose to, but forced vaccination violates all of these treaties, all of these laws, all of these codes that we have established and decided we would live by since Nazi Germany. Loss of income, loss of ability, quarantining people, preventing people from discussing things, suppression of knowledge and information, all violations of these international codes. The loss of liberty, we've seen it, the coercion, the threats. you know, the labeling of people as terrorists if they're not vaccinated. All this has done is to polarize the country instead of allowing us to unite and address problems. It has been a threat held over everybody's heads, just like Goering pointed out in his trial in 1947 in Nuremberg. Tell the people there's a problem. Tell them there's only one type of solution to the problem, and anybody who violates that and doesn't go along with it is a terrorist. That's exactly what we're seeing today. This is the International Criminal Court, and I want to point out that 4 countries have brought cases to the International Criminal Court that they have consolidated together, from the United Kingdom, from Slovakia, from France, and the Czech Republic, where they have asked the International Criminal Court to hold the individuals responsible for the development of this gain-of-function virus, for the development of these vaccines, which is nothing more than the same gene sequence of the gain-of-function virus, to hold them criminally accountable in the International Criminal Court. These cases were brought by attorneys McCallum and Main from the United Kingdom, from Weiss, Perizikova and Schmidt from Slovakia, from Lepellier and Cohen from France, and by Nielsen in the Czech Republic. These are brave souls to step forward, and even though these are the 4 countries, once this is accepted and the investigations are begun, anybody whose information shows the court that they are criminally culpable will be brought into the case. These cases were filed with sworn affidavits by 3 individuals: Professor Luc Montagnier, who is the Nobel laureate for discovering HIV, Professor Dr. Kevin McCarran, who's one of the world's premier neurobiologists with rhesus macaques animal models, and myself. This book is COVID-19, a bioweapon, was also submitted as evidence because it lays out where the monies came from, the publications, and the patents. This is the document that I provided to them, to include at least a beginning list of individuals to be held criminally accountable and prosecuted, including the head of HHS, Fort Detrick, where half of the money came from, multiple committees throughout the United States, and chairs, and along with Dr. Stephen Fauci, Dr. Francis Collins, Peter Daszak at EcoHealth, Ralph Barrick at University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill, and Shizeng Li, and the Gates Foundations for their involvements in this. In addition to that, we have received support from a letter from Nazi concentration camp survivors. Moshe Brown, Hillel Handler, and Vera Sharav signed the documents. These people lived through Nazi concentration camps, and they informed me that there are others who wanted to sign the documents, including a personal friend of Anne Frank, who are afraid to submit it because of the fear that they have for retribution. Now, you can't tell me that we're dealing with good people without nefarious intent when Nazi concentration camp survivors are afraid to stand up and raise questions about criminal culpability. This is the letter from these brave Nazi concentration camp survivors. They hand delivered it to the ICC on the 20th of September. This is the final part. These are their signatures. These are the countries who have signed and or ratified the ICC documents. The US signed it but did not ratify it, but that does not mean that US individuals cannot be held criminally accountable. Remember, Nazi Germany thought nobody could hold them accountable because they certainly didn't sign and ratify anything that said you can hold criminal cases against us. We need your support. Your children need your support. Your grandchildren need your support. And you should recognize that these people are going to hold you accountable. Your children and your grandchildren will hold you accountable. These judges for the ICC will hold them accountable, their children and grandchildren, because history is being written, and the type of world that you decide to leave is very contingent upon your actions that will be taken from here on out, and what's been going on for the last 22 months. If you want to sign the petition, and I would ask you to join us because we have over 40,000 signatures so far from more than 80 countries around the world. You can go to the website that I have, which lays out much of the information about this virus and about the disease, published research papers, not my opinion, the published data. You can go to www.ncbi.org www.flemingmethod.com. You will see this site. You click on this petition, it will take you to this page. You simply go to sign the petition, whether you want to add a statement or not. But this is an opportunity for you to become actively involved versus so many people who are kind of just moaning and groaning about things, but aren't actually taking any active role. This is the time that we will all be held accountable in history, one way or another. It's about our children. It's about our grandchildren. It's about deciding who we're going to allow to do research on whom and at what cost, and whether we're going to have informed consent. And remember that the first people that Adolf Hitler put in concentration camps were the PhDs, and then the doctors, and then the Jews, and then the homeless and undesirables. Help prove Hermann Wilhelm Goering wrong. If you've ever wondered what you would have done back in 1930s Germany, what you're doing today is a clear definition of what you would have done then. Thank you.
So powerful. Thank you so much, Dr. Fleming, for your words, your research, the book, the work that you're doing behind the scenes. It's comforting to me, and I probably speak for many in the room as well. So we have two more speakers on this panel that I'm very excited to hear from as well. Brian Festa is up next. He is a civil rights attorney and vice president and co-founder of We the Patriots USA, and he'll be joining us on Zoom today. And I just want to make sure, can you hear us, Dr. Festa?
Yes. Attorney Festa.
Oh, Attorney Festa, sorry. So many doctors. Everybody gets a doctorate today.
I'm not a doctor.
You're welcome.
But just call me Brian. Just call me Brian.
Brian,
yes.
it is. All
I'm
right,
happy
take it
to
away.
be here. I'm happy to be here. Thank you very much for inviting me to participate in this very important event. I think it's just very crucial, the work that you're doing to share this information, have people come together. I'm hoping we have people in the audience listening either online or in person that are not, already on our side, so to speak, that are not already convinced of the atrocities that are taking place that Dr. Fleming just talked about, and need some of this education. So I hope that this gets shared at the very least, if the people aren't here, who may be in that camp. I hope this information is widely shared. So I am a civil rights attorney, as was mentioned. I am the co-founder and vice president of We the Patriots USA. We are a charitable nonprofit organization, a national nonprofit organization. So we operate in all 50 states. And what we're trying to do is to push back against this tyranny, the kind of tyranny that Dr. Fleming was just talking about. We've been doing that for quite some time, actually. Even before we formed this organization, my business partner, Don Jolly, and I were both involved in the medical freedom movement, for as far as specifically vaccine mandates for several years. And in Don's case, over 18 years now. In my case, probably about 5 years now. We both have personal stories of vaccine injury, either for ourselves or related to our children. I have a very seriously vaccine injured child who was injured by the flu shot several years ago. And that's what piqued my interest to get, to study this more and see what's going on here, and that we've been lied to for so many years. So I think, it's important to note that for our perspective is a little bit different than a lot of people who are fighting these mandates today, because we've been involved in medical freedom and individual rights activism for many, many years. This organization, my organization, We the Patriots USA, is not a political activist organization. We are a nonprofit charitable organization, and we're primarily focused at the moment on litigation in response to the COVID mandates, in particular the shot mandates. I hesitate to use the V word, and I'm trying to avoid using the V word. It's hard even for me sometimes, though, because it's so permeated in the mainstream media to be calling this a vaccine, when in fact it is not actually, does not fit the scientific definition, medical definition of a vaccination. But I'm not here to talk about science. What we're primarily focused on is religious liberty, because this is a religious liberty issue. And we feel that our greatest successes in the courts will be on the grounds of religious liberty. And the reason I say that is I want you to think about our founding documents. I want you to think about the founding of our country. And you read those documents, if you've ever read those documents, religion, belief in a creator, a higher power, is at the center of all of them. It's what this country was founded on. And we have over 200 years of jurisprudence supporting religious freedom. For that reason, I personally believe we have a much better chance of success winning these battles standing on religious freedom. And that's a little bit of a contradiction, I know, to what Dr. Fleming was just talking about. Although he's was discussing international courts, I'm not involved in that in any way. I'm talking about specifically in the United States of America, in our justice system. Religious liberty is going to carry the day, I believe. It's going to get us a lot further in this battle, and it's why we haven't really pursued a lot of the scientific arguments, some of the arguments he was talking about, because we haven't seen a very positive response from judges in this country with regard to those arguments. International courts, again, I can't speak on that. I'm not an international trial lawyer, so I don't have that expertise, and I'm not going to even go there. I'll leave that to Dr. Fleming's team to explore that further. But I firmly believe that religious liberty is going to win this for us. We've already had a victory. We had a victory just about 2 weeks ago at the Second Circuit on, arguing for an injunction against the New York healthcare workers mandate. So, for instance, in that case, it was just appalling what happened. The state of New York, Department of Health, and Governor Hochul actually, I still can't believe it. I've told the story many times, but I can't believe it's even true that a state government would do this. I guess I shouldn't be surprised these days, but they disallowed religious exemptions from the COVID shot mandates for all healthcare workers in the state of New York. So it's not even an option. It's not like we're saying, oh no, it's denied for XYZ reason, or it's an undue hardship, as some hospital systems have been saying. No, you're not even allowed to apply for one if you're a healthcare worker. Somehow the free exercise clause of the First Amendment, equal protection clause of the 14th Amendment, and several other clauses of the Constitution do not apply to you if you're a frontline hero. Remember that? They were frontline heroes last year. That's what we called them. Now they're zeros. They went from heroes to zeros. So they're being fired by the thousands all across the United States. It's disgusting what's happening. And then 2 days before we went on into oral argument at the Second Circuit, we had Kathy Hochul herself get up at a Christian fellowship in a Christian meeting in Brooklyn and say to the crowd there, who was gathered there to watch her speech, that this vaccine, and she called it a vaccine, this vaccine is from God. And I need all of you to be my apostles. I could not believe that what I was watching. It was like out of a dystopian nightmare movie or a book or something, but it is, because that's what we're living in, right? That's what we're living in. It's playing out before our very eyes. It wasn't some sort of joke she was making. She was serious that she's creating sort of a religion, a state-sponsored religion surrounding these shots and these mandates. And it was, if she was going to do that, it was great that she did it 2 days before our hearing, because, I conferred with our attorneys and I said, we have to do this. We have to use this to our advantage. Clearly, she's interfering it's the state interfering with religious beliefs and trying to impose religion, a sort of religion, onto its people, and disallowing their own just freedom, their own beliefs. Now, there's only one religion now, and it's the religion around vaccines and these particular COVID shots and these mandates. So I thought that was just appalling. We used it to our advantage in the oral argument. The judges agreed. This is the Second Circuit. Now, a lot of people say the second, they talk about these blue states, and they say there's liberal judges, and we're not going to win anything, in these areas. Well, we're proving that wrong because the evidence is so appalling. The hostility to religious liberty is so appalling that it can't be denied, regardless of any individual's political affiliation. It clearly can't be denied when you're that blatant about it. We are winning battles. Now, we haven't won the whole lawsuit. Okay, I want to be clear about that. They didn't agree that there was religious discrimination. That's not what the ruling was. The ruling was to put a temporary injunction in place to stop the state of New York from enforcing it temporarily until a full hearing can be had. We have another hearing coming up this Thursday, October 14th at 9 a.m. at the Second Circuit, which will be a full hearing to decide whether there's a preliminary injunction in place throughout the entire lawsuit while the underlying lawsuit plays out, which means the state will not be able to disallow healthcare workers from getting religious exemptions, from applying for religious exemptions, which will be a huge victory. We think our chances are very good. If we don't win at the Second Circuit, we think our chances are even better at the Supreme Court of the United States. I know there was a lot of talk with the Indiana University case a few months ago with Justice Amy Coney Barrett denying that emergency appeal, but that actually legally was the correct decision. That does not mean she doesn't support religious liberty. I think she actually does. I think she's going to rule in our favor in these cases, to be honest with you, but that wasn't the right case. That wasn't the right case because every plaintiff in that case, it was Indiana University students who were fighting the mandate, but it was a general challenge to the mandate. It wasn't because they had been denied religious exemptions. Every single person, every single plaintiff in that case had already been granted an exemption, except one who didn't ask for one. So I would have had to deny it too if I were the judge or the justice. I actually would have, because legally, the law says you cannot take a case if the plaintiffs lack standing. If they have not personally been injured, you don't have jurisdiction over that case, subject matter jurisdiction. That's the law. So there was a lot of talk in the media that she's sold out and she's not on our side. That's nonsense. It's absolute nonsense. She's 100%, in my opinion, she's 100% on our side. And in my opinion, she's going to rule on our side if a case gets before her. That's my opinion. So that just wasn't the right case. So people have to look at the facts and they have to understand the law before they go making claims like that and throwing the baby out with the bathwater. All right. It's about getting the right case there. And that just wasn't the right case. Okay, we believe we have a couple of cases that are the right case. This New York healthcare workers case is an excellent case. We also have a lawsuit against the state of Connecticut for repealing the religious exemptions to mandatory childhood immunizations for school attendance. They eliminated the religious exemption in Connecticut, as many of you know, in April of this year. We immediately, within days of that signing into law, that bill being signed into law, we immediately filed a lawsuit against the state. And that is before a federal judge as well. That case will be heard later this month. October 27th is the date. So we have a lot of cases. We have a case against Creighton University right now, which is a supposedly Catholic university in Omaha, Nebraska. Two Catholic students had applied for exemptions, religious exemptions, because they objected to the use of aborted fetal cells in the research and the development, the testing of these shots. And they were both denied. They actually said, well, Creighton doesn't allow for religious waivers. It was just a blanket prohibition. We're not going to even allow it, sort of like what New York did, right? So we have a lawsuit we just filed last week against them. We have another lawsuit pending against the University of Colorado for a similar thing, a medical school student who has been denied a religious exemption. We have I can't give details about that one because that one hasn't officially been filed yet. But we have a lot of, I see I'm being given my two-minute warning. We have a lot of lawsuits pending across the United States. And again, I can't reveal everything about them. We're also supporting the litigation efforts, the legal efforts of Jody O'Malley, who's the Project Veritas whistleblower that went undercover in that federal Indian hospital and recorded footage of doctors admitting the harm that these shots are doing and what they're seeing. She's now been placed on administrative leave and is being investigated by the Arizona Nursing Board, State Board of Nursing. We're supporting her. We're fully funding her preliminary legal efforts. And so news of that, you'll be hearing more news of that as well. So we're doing a lot of exciting things all across the United States. Go to our website, wethepatriotsusa.org, where you can find out more about our organization and our legal efforts and all the other stuff that we're doing. And the biggest need right now is funding. I didn't come here to do a funding pitch. I wanted to just talk about my organization and what we're doing in the courts. But that's the biggest need right now, because obviously these lawsuits are extremely expensive. I mean, one lawsuit could be $50,000 to $100,000. And our goal is to have dozens of them filed in every circuit of this country. So you're talking about, you're literally 7 figures worth of expenses just in litigation expenses, never mind managing the organization. So if you're able to, we have a Commit to 10 campaign that we launched a couple months ago. We're asking everyone to just donate at least $10 a month and tell at least 10 people to do the same, because we know that's what it's going to take. It's going to take thousands and thousands of people all across the country coming together to support us in order to get this done. Because look at who we're up against, folks. Bill Gates, George Soros, big tech, big pharma, state governments, the federal government. Collectively, they have unlimited resources, okay? So we need to have resources too if we're going to have a viable litigation machine to defeat these tyrants. And with that, I want to thank you. It's been a pleasure. I'll stay on for any questions if there is time at the end.
Thank you so much, Dr. Brian. Just kidding. Attorney Brian, that was fantastic. And if you wouldn't mind staying on, we will be doing a 15-minute Q&A after our next speaker. And we'd love for you to stay on that panel if you're able. So we're going to move forward to our final speaker in this panel. We are lucky to have them in person today. Dr. Kelly Sutton received her medical degree from the University of Missouri School of Medicine and pursued training in internal medicine and pediatrics. She received certification by the American Board of Internal Medicine and by the Board of Anthroposcopic Medicine. She has practiced anthroposcopic and integrative medicine for over 40 years and studied botanical oncology with Donnie Yance. She is the founding member of Physicians for Informed Consent. Dr. Sutton currently provides telehealth and has active medical licensure in California and Massachusetts. And on a personal note, she may not remember this, but I dug deep into the internet years ago for an issue that my daughter had following a vaccine, and she helped us through that. You may not even know who I am, but it's amazing how your help permeates. So thank you for that, and we're happy to hear from you. Do you have a PowerPoint that you need to share? Great, you're powerful enough. Here we go. We'll give you the mountains. Yeah.
Just a second, please. Where did it even go?
Minimized.
Oh, okay. So remember how, so she's going to be speaking, so she's not on camera. I can't see her. She doesn't have a presentation. She's just going to speak. But she's not on the. Okay. Okay. Okay, great. Thank you. All right. Then.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate very much the chance to learn. It's been wonderful. Immunology, law, and international matters of very great importance. My contact information is at my website, www.raphaelmedicine.com. And Raphael is spelled R-A-P-H-A-E-L, medicine.com. I'm just a doctor. I don't have background in politics. I apologize in advance if I offend anyone. That is not my intent. So in the early 2000s, Boston and the country faced the shock of pedophilia in the Catholic Church. What we face now is no different. The process of the pandemic response has been made more important than the human beings whose lives are trafficked by the pandemic response. The public is repeatedly exposed to wrong messaging about COVID disease, treatment options, and COVID shot safety. Information known to scientists is withheld from the public, as you've seen today. So in knowing that this is around legislators and their work, there are a number of topics that could be addressed through legislation that I will suggest. The single most important one is to prevent compulsory vaccination of Massachusetts children with the COVID shot. We stand at a precipice in the nation with the pushing of vaccination mandates for children. Children are not vulnerable to COVID disease, but they are very vulnerable to the COVID shot. The myocarditis that we've heard about today shows up in 1 in 1,000 20-year-old young men, but 1 in 300 16-year-old children. And it appears that the inflammatory issues are worse the younger the person is. There has been no COVID outbreaks in schools, and there's no COVID transmission from children to teachers. The transmission of COVID occurs in homes and in nursing homes. The informed consent by parents is essential, and it's almost impossible in today's propagandized information environment. Parents need to know that the lipid nanoparticle concentrates in ovaries and their children are at risk of lowered fertility if they are getting the vaccine. And the spike protein, as we've heard today, is a known lethal protein that we're injecting into children to make their bodies produce multiples of. The second thing that can be done is to demand of the CDC, the FDA, and the NIH a full explanation of what is happening with COVID vaccine reactions and how to treat them, and to reinstitute the Data Safety Monitoring Board and have weekly publicized reports to the nation on what new data reveals. There's a massive amount of data from around the world on what's going on with the COVID shot. The DSMB, Data Safety Monitoring Board, was in place during the original drug trials. But since emergency use authorization, there has been no review of data by a monitoring board. We hear from Anthony Fauci, the CDC, and the FDA. All of these own vaccine patents. So their okay is not enough. There needs to be a separate board, and the public needs to hear what that board sees in its review of data. Therapeutic nihilism means not treating and having no therapeutic options. And that's what happened when COVID disease started. We cannot be the same way with regard to reactions to the COVID shot. People deserve help with these reactions and are being given none. That's the job of medicine and the scientific bodies that support medicine. Third, please guarantee that Massachusetts physicians are able to protect their patients without their licenses being at risk. Physician autonomy is foundational to quality healthcare. Without physician autonomy, patient health suffers. Ask the Massachusetts Medical Board and the Massachusetts Medical Association what safeguards they each have in place to ensure physician autonomy without retribution in deciding treatment for their patients. There are two negative instances of this, one in Canada and one in California. Dr. Daniel Nagase, I think in Ontario, successfully treated 3 COVID patients and within an hour was removed from his position by the provincial head of medicine, who replaced him with another physician who stopped ivermectin, inhalers, and antibiotics for patients whose main complaint was respiratory distress. Using the profession of medicine to stop treatment of patients shows us the underbelly of medicine. Government doctors preempting individual doctors who know the patient is a fall from grace, from the respect given to the profession in the past. In California, Senator Richard Pan has stated that doctors are agents of the state, totally redefining the profession of medicine. Is that the direction Massachusetts wants to go? You have that choice at this point of influence in time. The fourth I would like to recommend consideration is to require that drug disclaimers be placed on all news programs aired in Massachusetts which urge vaccination. Every other drug or medicine aired on media is required to state adverse and side effects. Vaccines should be required to do the same. Vaccines hold a particularly attractive position among all medicines with regard to the business potential they have. They are without product liability since 1986, and they have been mandated already. So people will accept another vaccine mandate. In terms of successful business planning, it behooves any new medicine to be labeled a vaccine to take advantage of these facts. However, the formulation of vaccines has changed since 1986 and is poorly scrutinized and not transparent to the public who consumes them at their own risk. Number 5, establish and require adverse event reporting for all forced medications, including the COVID shot. It's one thing to have a reaction to a vaccine or a medicine that you wanted, but it's a different thing to have one that's forced. Society needs a mirror to see what the outcomes are of public health policy, which states the public is benefited, but does not track side effects of forced medicines, including vaccines. For going on 3 decades, Congress has directed the CDC to perform a vaccinated versus unvaccinated study to answer the fundamental question regarding all vaccinations. Do vaccinations improve overall health? Or do they just stop childhood diseases and bring on chronic disease? Children today have more chronic illness, 54% of them, in comparison with 12% in the 1980s. Evidence from the control group study, which is at www.thecontrolgroupstudy.org, a statistical comparison of known data on health of Americans who are 99% vaccinated with a survey of those in this country who are not vaccinated, shows dramatically better health in the unvaccinated. This information forms the basis of a lawsuit filed before the Supreme Court of the United States on August 26, 2021, to acknowledge that vaccines cause injury and prevent vaccine mandates in this country. Global vaccination of every human being effectively destroys the control group of the unvaccinated. There will be no human beings whose immune system has not been tampered with by one vaccine or another. The gold standard of scientific trials is comparing the control group who have not received the products being studied with those who have received them. The door shuts on future vaccine science if global vaccination of every human being is accomplished. Number 6 and number 7 both reflect what was brought, especially by Dr. Fleming. November 20th is the anniversary of the first trial of Nuremberg, which happened November 20th, 1945. That should not be unnoticed. Convene a Nuremberg 75th anniversary science report card meeting using the vast intellectual capital of Massachusetts institutions of higher learning and include the people of Massachusetts. Why was there no early treatment protocol for COVID coming forth from the many fine institutions in Massachusetts? Dr. Peter McCullough has asked this question. In June 2020, there were 55,000 published peer-reviewed papers on COVID, none of which taught doctors how to treat patients who had COVID. What, in the honest assessment of the brilliant minds in science and medicine in Massachusetts, contributed to the total systemic failure of intellectual medicine in the United States in this regard? And I thank Dr. McCullough for that phrasing. What areas in the medical literature process are corrupt and in need of reform? Establish transparency of all data as a condition for funding and/or for widespread use of any product that the studies support. How is the work of independent researchers protected from being crushed by a dominant research theme or the interests of pharma? At this point, I want to read a quote from a NIH retired immunologist who wrote a very popular scientific article. It was an invited article and peer-reviewed and published in December of 2020. The title is long: Deceptology in Cancer and Vaccine Sciences, Seeds of Immune Destruction, Mini Electric Shocks in Mitochondria, Neuroplasticity, Electrobiology of Response Profiles, and Increased Induced Diseases in 4 Generations, a Hypothesis. Her quote is this: "These are challenging times for correcting the disease status that was created by Rockefeller medicine and continued by Gates vaccine. It requires a serious change of heart for policymakers and professionals, as well as a public awareness of the issues to help purge the deceptology in the cancer and vaccine sciences and hold the perpetrators of this deception responsible for fraudulent products in the medical sciences." The last point I'd like to bring is that there be a Nuremberg 75th anniversary journalism report card that also taps Massachusetts journalistic talent and includes the people of Massachusetts. There are questions there too, and there could be one of the judiciary, I realize, after listening to Brian. How did journalism contribute to the Nazi regime and the world response? What is the history of government by journalism? That's very much what we have today. The supposed mandate for businesses is not an OSHA decision, nor is it an executive order, and yet the country is following it. And it can't be attacked because it's not been brought in the normal way. It's just the power of the press. Who pulls these strings today? What is the role and responsibility of journalism in medical outcomes? It has today become abundantly clear that medicine and science are at their core monsters when individual conscience is lacking. This essential nature needs to be named. Medicine and science are not the respected icons of society, automatically bringing good to humanity. They are the tools of whoever runs them. Good-willed physicians and nurses abound, applying their skills for the benefit of each patient. Their freedom to fulfill the high goals for which they studied keeps the monsters in cages. Honest journalism keeps many monsters in cages. Massachusetts and every state legislature needs to chain the monsters of science and medicine so their power is only used in the service of humanity. Without this, medicine and science will not serve humanity, but will make humanity wetware for experiments with hidden methods and the intent of total control. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Dr. Sutton. So that concludes our third panel. And at this time, we would just ask that if anyone in the room has questions, feel free to raise them now, and Hannah will take a peek at our Zoom and live feeds to see if there are any questions. Yes, here in the front in the tie.
So it makes sense what Mr. Festa said about bringing lawsuits to protect individual liberties on the basis of religious liberty. But I was wondering, and this might be a question for Dr. Fleming, in terms of a political strategy, certainly the Nuremberg Code and all those other codes are very powerful, articulate codes. And I'm wondering whether you found in raising issues based on those codes with politicians, say, or other people in a more political role, whether that's an effective strategy, or can that be dismissed as being overkill? I mean, people often more tend towards trying to make a reasoned case, but I'm wondering what role those codes can play in terms of an effective way of, say, engaging or even confronting your legislators or other people in powers of political power.
Right. So this is not a one single answer to solve this problem. They've spent decades working on this and developing it, and the response to it will have to be multifactorial. The ultimate criminal court on this planet is the International Criminal Court, and that's the reason why we have pursued that action. However, I have been very active in helping to promote other cases. In fact, I provided an affidavit yesterday that will be submitted for the Los Alamos facility for a case that's going before a judge on Thursday to hold an injunction to stop mandatory vaccination of individuals in a U.S. nuclear power facility, somewhat applicable given my physics background, to put a stop on that. I've been very active in the legislation here in the state of Dallas, helping to formulate statutes. And you may be aware that the governor of Texas just called for, thanks to a number of people showing up on Sunday, just called for a call for laws to be passed, for bills to be presented in this special session to forbid any mandatory vaccination of anybody in the state of Texas, independent upon whether they are a federal employee or a private employee. And I've gone so far as to state that those laws should include masking, testing, vaccination. You know, the Supreme Court had a case in Missouri against the Department of Health and Human Services, where the Supreme Court of the United States, last time I checked, was still the ruling body for laws in this country, held that U.S. citizens could not be required to receive a treatment that they did not want to have. Now, that's the law of the land, and that needs to be applied. The reason for pointing out so much of these international criminal codes is that the US Constitution very clearly establishes that constitutional law, passed legislation by Congress, and treaties are the law of the land. Those treaties I talked about require informed consent for the President of the United States or any other elected official who takes an oath to uphold and defend the Constitution of the United States to then mandate that something must happen circumventing those informed consents is treason by definition. So in the United States, such individuals should be held accountable in U.S. federal courts. And I have called for the Congress of the United States to indict and prosecute Anthony Fauci for committing perjury before the U.S. Congress when he said that the U.S. does not provide any gain of function research. I've provided the documents, I've provided the money trail, the published papers, and the patents that show that NIH is very specifically involved with Ralph Baric and Shizang Li and Peter Daszak in gain of function research of the spike proteins of coronaviruses. I'm calling not just for International Criminal Court, I'm calling for federal courts and state courts and district courts and local courts. I'm calling on the citizens of this country to notify their elected officials that if they want to keep their job when the next election cycle comes around, that they need to listen to the people that they represent. Because while this is not a democracy, one person, one vote, this is a republic. People are voted into office. They're not born into office. And a document that 2/3 comes from my family documents, called the Declaration of Independence, states that we, the people, run the country, not the government running the people. So that Declaration of Independence, that represents family documents. 2/3 of it is a Flemish document from the 1500s. The answer to this is for the people to rise up, take accountability, call on their legislators, remind them who they work for, call in on the judges. I'm making the judges aware, I'm making the doctors aware, I'm making the people like Fauci aware that they are going to be held criminally accountable.
Thank you, Dr. Fleming. Brian or Dr. Sutton, if you have anything you want to add to that before we move on to the next question.
No, I think that pretty much sums up the answer he was looking for. I don't think he.
Hard to follow that.
Yeah, I don't think he was asking me a question.
Yes, Julie.
Okay, so can you hear to this? Okay. So this is a question for Brian. We've been told by some of our legislators that the only religion that allows an exemption as part of their beliefs from vaccines are Christian Scientists. And I would love it if you would speak to that for a minute.
Yeah, I'd be happy to speak to that. So we've heard that a lot too from our legislators here in Connecticut, where I'm based. It's completely irrelevant because the Supreme Court has repeatedly stated and other courts, federal courts, repeatedly stated that your beliefs don't have to align with any one particular organized religion to gain protection. So there's no Supreme Court case. If you want me to cite a case that says you need to be part of this or that organized religion to get protection, I'm not going to be able to cite one because it doesn't exist. The Constitution says nothing about only certain religions are allowed protection in certain instances. As a matter of fact, that would be a violation of the Establishment Clause, where the the Establishment Clause of the First Amendment that says Congress shall make no law respecting an establishment of religion. That means you can't give preference. This is often called separation of church and state, but what it really says is you can't give preference to certain religions over others. So it's actually illegal. It's unconstitutional for a legislator, as we've had legislators, for an executive body, agency, the governor, anyone to come out and say only these particular religions are allowed to have religious protection. There's even conscience objections that are protected. So if you look at a pair of cases that were decided a few years apart during the Vietnam War era, United States versus Seeger first, and then Welsh versus United States, where it was an Establishment Clause case actually, and it was about conscientious objection to enlisting in the service, to participating in war, basically. And in that case, the overall conclusion though was that even personal beliefs that are not rooted in any kind of organized religion are entitled to First Amendment protection, and that the government can't give preference to only established religious beliefs, only certain beliefs over others. So it's just completely ludicrous when I hear that.
Thank you for that. Any other questions? Yes, in the plaid.
My question is for lawyer Brian.
Again, it's just Brian. Just say
Brian.
We really want to give you a qualifier.
Just Brian. I was wondering if you would be able to tap on any kind of medical exemption. The situation with me particularly, and may apply to other people around the country, is I believe in a creator. I know that I was made by my creator, but my creator decided to make me a little disheveled. I have a hereditary condition, a very dominant hereditary condition, and my organ malfunctions. The only cure for me is either dialysis or a transplant. Now, although I believe in a creator, and despite the way that my creator made me, how can I exercise medical exemption? I guess intertwining with religious exemption as well, because again, I was created by my creator. I believe in that, but my medical aspect is more, I guess, dominant and profound in the aspect when it does come to putting something in my body. Are there any medical exemptions or things that could be exercised to protect me other than my religious aspect?
I mean, I wish I had a better answer, but what I've seen, and again, I've been talking to people from coast to coast, what I've seen is medical exemptions are almost impossible to get in most circumstances. And when they are, they're temporary. So I see companies giving people 90 days medical exemptions, and then they'll be reviewed after that. And you have to get updated notifications or updated medical documentation from your physician. I've seen pregnant women get exemptions, but only until they come back from maternity leave. And now, especially with the CDC now coming out and saying it's safe for pregnant women, that's even going to change. Those aren't going to hold up anymore. I had one woman come to me who was recently recovered, is in remission from leukemia, went to her oncologist and said, no, the university health system has told us absolutely not. We can't give exemptions to anyone, even if you're actively under cancer treatment and chemo, whatever. We can't give exemptions to anyone. Another young lady that I spoke to works for a very prominent university in the South. And as a scientist, actually, she's only in her 20s, though. She's, again, in that myocarditis, danger zone, the 18 to 30 danger zone. And she recently had heart surgery and was on a heart monitor for 21 days. And they told her, no, you don't qualify. So basically what I tell people when they call and ask about medical exemptions is my personal opinion, it's not official legal advice, but my personal opinion is that unless you're 5 minutes away from death, you're not getting an exemption. That's, and honestly, religious exemptions have way more protection in the law. Like I said, we've got over 200 years of jurisprudence for religious freedom and religious protection. The Americans with Disabilities Act, the ADA, has only been around since 1990. There's only 31 years of precedent for it. So it doesn't even come close to what we have on the books for religious liberty. So it's counterintuitive. A lot of people think, well, if I have a medical reason, they definitely have to exempt me. I'm solid if I have a medical exemption, but actually religion is way more protected in the law than medicine is. It doesn't mean that disabilities aren't respected, but again, you have to prove that this is really a disability. In your case, sounds like you certainly have a disability, but for a lot of people, it's things that wouldn't even qualify under the ADA as disabilities. So it's just fears about like, well, I've had, problems in the past, or I've had bad reactions to other shots, and I'm just worried about this one. Well, worry doesn't give you ADA protection. You have to actually prove that you're gonna, that you have to have, and most doctors won't even write them because they're being told if you write them, you're going to be under scrutiny and you could lose your license. They're being threatened. Doctors, I've actually talked to doctors that told they've been given directives, do not write these or you will pay for it. So it's hard to even get the note from the doctor to begin with, but even if you get one, most of the employers aren't accepting them. So again, I'm sorry, I don't have better news, but that's just been my experience.
Thank you for that. We have time for one more question. We'll take from somebody on live stream. Julie will read.
Okay, I believe this is another question for Attorney Brian. This is a question from the Facebook live stream. I am a JetBlue pilot. We were told we must get the shot by 12/8. We will have until this Friday to apply for a religious exemption. We were told not to pursue any legal avenues until religious exemptions are denied. Is this good advice, or should we as a group be pursuing a legal avenue at this time? We were also told we will probably get an exemption and then get, hold on one sec, and then get fired after the first of the year.
Okay, so I've heard from a few different pilots, from a Southwest pilot, from Delta pilot, American Airlines pilot. Now I have JetBlue to add to my list. So thank you. I want you to reach out and contact me because we are actively pursuing some potential litigation against the airlines. So I want you to email me. You can email info@wethepatriotsusa.org, info@wethepatriotsusa.org. And I want to talk to you about potential litigation. What I will say just in general to the audience listening is that yes, in general, you need to have your religious exemption denied before we can take any action. So once you get that denial, we'll talk more about this when we talk on the phone, but email me and provide your phone number. But once you get that denial, then we can take legal action. Because remember I was saying earlier about not having standing in that Indiana University case. Again, if you haven't actually been harmed, if I go into court with someone who hasn't even been denied yet, it's going to be case dismissed. Come back to me after you've actually suffered some harm. The courts are there, in general, to offer remedial action to help you after you've been hurt, not to necessarily prevent it. Although there can be injunctions filed, especially with state action, you get that a lot. An injunction filed to prevent something from going to effect, a law that's been passed or something. And we're actually doing that in the New York healthcare workers lawsuit. But in general, like for an employment case, the courts aren't going to get involved in a personnel decision. They're going to say, well, wait to see what the outcome is. And then if you've been harmed, then you can take legal action. So I know people are very, very anxious. They don't want to have to lose their jobs first. I'm not saying you have to lose your jobs first, but if you've just been denied and then they say, okay, now you've been denied, you have 2 weeks to get it or else you're fired. In those 2 weeks, we can try to do a lot of things. And we definitely want to talk to you. I definitely want to put you in touch with our attorneys. I say our attorneys, I'm an attorney, but I don't do most of the frontline legal work. I leave that to our legal team. We hire outside counsel. We're not a law firm. We're a nonprofit. Again, go to We the Patriots USA to find out more about our organization and to make a donation. Please also follow us on Telegram. So we're heavily, heavily, heavily censored on the mainstream social media. Actually, we get kicked off Twitter. That might be a potential lawsuit too. I'll talk about that another time. But we are heavily censored on all those mainstream platforms, but we have a great Telegram channel that's growing every day. Tons of news and updates, not only about our legal efforts, but about all things going on all across the country. So I strongly encourage everybody watching, listening to join our Telegram channel. It's We the Patriots USA on Telegram, t.me/We the Patriots USA.
Thank you so much. I would like to give one last round of, oh, yes, if it's a very quick question.
To either one of them, has there been any like success with the testing piece of it? Because I know we talked a lot about the acceptance of the vaccine, but what about, earlier the panel we talked about people constantly testing every single day,
Mhm.
testing,
Mhm.
what can you speak on about that?
In terms of getting exempt from testing?
Yeah, like what is the legal avenue as far as testing goes?
Okay. Is that a question for me? I think they're
Yeah, I think so. So she was just asking about if the exemptions apply to things like PCR testing, or is it just for the vaccine?
if you have a medical exemption, medical exemptions of testing, I haven't really seen those. Like I said, they haven't worked at all with the vaccine mandates, but from what I've seen in most cases, they haven't been very successful. But with testing, unless you have a medical note saying for some reason you can't get tested a certain way, but then you'll probably have to get alternatives. So if you don't want to do the up the nose test, there are saliva tests. Maybe you could get a medical exemption as an accommodation to do that instead. Not really on religious grounds. I haven't seen any of those be successful because it's kind of out of left field. I mean, even personal beliefs, you don't have to be part of an organized religion, as I said, but even a personal beliefs, what person can sincerely say that they've objected to having PCR tested their whole life? I mean, no, it's not. I mean, that was never a thing, right? But suddenly today you have that objection. That's your religious beliefs. There has to be some sort of foundation there. Usually courts are going to kind of look askance at something like that just comes out of left field. So religious and medical exemptions, I don't know. What I will also say is, unfortunately, these aren't usually good discrimination cases. And what I mean by that is because it's based on vaccination status. They are discriminating against you, but they're not doing it based on necessarily religion or disability or any one protected class, race, national origin, all of the protected classes that are in Title VII and in most state laws. They're doing it based on vaccination status. So regardless of whether it was for religious reasons or medical reasons that you're objecting, they're treating all unvaccinated the same. They have to be subject to this testing, whereas the vaccinated don't. But here's the problem. Vaccination status isn't listed as a protected class in any of those statutes, Title VII or state laws. So they actually can get away with discriminating based on vaccination status because it's not a protected class. That needs to change. I don't think it's going to happen anytime soon. But that's the major problem there, is that it's technically not against the law to discriminate based on vaccination status.
Great. Thank you very much. So we'll take a very quick stretch break. Very quick stretch break. We're running about a half an hour behind. We'll be back in just a minute for our final panel.